I hope you're ready, guys, because this build is very ice. Like nice, like ice, like nice ice, like, please don't go, I'm so sorry. Hello, my fellow sorcerers! How fares you this fine day? Hopefully well, and well, I have one final build to bring you before Season 1, and the big patch before it changes everything. And it is a update, upgrade, and best version of a build I debuted a couple weeks back that I have had a lot of requests to update and upgrade it, and that is exactly what I have done. And as you're seeing, it's a bit of blizzardy goodness. Now, a little bit ago, I showed you all my Infinifreeze chain ranged Ice Shards explosion of ice, just awesomeness that really is fun and powerful to play, and that went down really well, and that made me really happy because I was really proud of that. So I figured, well, if we can Infinifreeze Ice Shards, why can't we Infinifreeze Blizzard? And really, we can Infinifreeze Blizzard. This is a champion speed farming build. You're not going to be pushing high nightmares with it, though you can, but where this shines is just walking through and dropping a single blizzard on every pack of enemies and then kind of leaving confident in the knowledge that they are going to die. If you are doing nightmares within sort of 20 levels of you, if you are farming XP, farming legendaries, doing hell tides or other overworld stuff, this is kind of like a cheat code, if I'm really real with you. The combination of ice spikes raining down, the Ice Shards Enchantment firing out, and every enemy just permanently being frozen, exploding, passing on the freeze explosion, and just making this chain detonation that is oh so glorious to see, and really works so goddamn well. And not to mention visually looks fantastic, which doesn't hurt either. So without further ado, let's get into this. Now traditionally we start with the skill tree. So we're going to 2 points in Firebolt, both to get to your core skills and to get the Firebolt enchantment, so we can take advantage of 2 words that I imagine you're as sick as hearing as I am, but hey, that's Sorcerer, let's hope the patch maybe changes it, but for now, Burning Synergy! Then we head down to the cores, get all 5 ranks of Ice Shard as our second enchantment slot to take advantage of frozen enemies by just passively killing them, and then we just want enhanced so they can ricochet off said frozen enemies. These 2 don't work unless we manually cast it, so it's a waste of a point if we're just using the enchantment, which we are. To the defensives, we always say, yes, please. Flame Shield up to Shimmering. Then we grab our teleport, the sweet teleport to Shimmering. And then we get simply just Ice Armor for an extra cooldown, an extra bit of survivability. And then Frost Nova for both that vulnerable application, but for a mass group triggering of the Ice Shard enchantment after teleporting with Raiment of the Infinite and grouping everybody. It's such a sweet little pop of death. Then 1 rank of Elemental Attunement, as this will trigger every 10 seconds with just the 1 rank, resetting and having us on our way. And then we actually get Ice Blade. See, this was a difficult decision because last time we just put Ice Shards on our bar, but we really just kind of want to keep stacking Blizzard if we're going to spend mana and cast something. So Ice Blades is the natural next best option for our final ability slot, as it gives us access to more vulnerable uptime, it makes our single target much more reliable, the cooldown reduction helps a little bit, and as a cooldown it gives us more barriers and more cooldown synergy, and it's kind of a cherry on top of the rest of the build. We get enhanced, we get summoned, and then we get out of here to align the elements in order to get full mana shield, as this will be permanently up, and then 2 ranks of protection to get consistent barriers. We only have 2 because we need the points elsewhere, and the consistency that we get barriers, especially once we get to the Ice for Legendary node, means it's not necessary to pump them further. We get 1 rank of Icy Veil just so we can get full Cold Front front for increased chill. While the goal of this build will be Blizzard instantly freezing enemies that you put it on instead of slowly freezing them over time, any enemy that doesn't get instantly frozen, we do want them frozen as fast as possible. Then we get said Blizzard. Now, we don't improve Blizzard because the damage comes from the Ice Spikes aspect, not Blizzard itself, so we can save 4 points here to improve things elsewhere. And then we grab Enhanced. Enemies will always be frozen, that's kind of the goal here. And then we get Mages, so it lasts 4 seconds longer. We will nearly always be casting it above 50 mana, so this is lovely. We want, yes, Devouring Blaze for that crit increase, as both the Ice Spikes and the Ice Shard enchantment can indeed crit. And then we go down to our passives here and get just all of the ice passives. The extra elite damage is glorious. The extra damage to frozen is glorious. They're always going to be frozen. The chance to get extra mana back keeps us topped up to spam layer blizzards. And then the icy touch, we are always going to have vulnerable enemies, so this is a nice bump to them too. Then lastly we get our key passive, which for this is Shatter. This is all about freezing, so naturally of course we want the enemies popping with damage when they are finished being frozen. It also is really the only choice, because obviously we don't care about fire, we don't care about shock, and avalanche doesn't really matter because we don't have mana problems, and we're not doing damage with the blizzard itself, so the damage bump doesn't do anything either. So that is your complete skill tree for this current setup. So enchantment slots is Firebolt for Burning Synergy, and then Ice Shards to take maximum advantage of frozen enemies by passively killing them as you speed your way through a dungeon, farming as hard and as fast as possible. Now, before we get to kind of how this actually plays and what's different from the previous Blizzardy Ice Spikesy build, we need to actually look at gear. So before we actually go into the playstyle here, how it works, what's different, what makes everything tick, we need to look at legendary aspects and gear. Ice Shards Piercing is required, so the enchantment does fire through enemies and it cleaves everything down in a line, and then we also want the thing that makes everything even possible. When Blizzard is cast, it puts ice spikes that explode. That's the little pops that you see going on, and they do stack up as you stack blizzards, and you start getting this awesome just and then on single target, this is absolutely shredding damage once you build up this amount of spikes. It's so much fun. Now, the reason that we don't have this on our necklace, which would give it 1.5 times power, i.e. make each ice spike do more damage, is because we are hybriding it with the Ice Shards enchantment. And we are also focusing heavily on damaging enemies that are permanently frozen, which means we want our usual aspect of control here to be as potent as possible so that it amps the damage of not just the Blizzard's ice spikes, but the Ice Shards enchantment too. If we were just using ice spikes and had a different second enchantment slot, then the ice spikes would go on the neck, but because we have mixed sources of damage here, we want them all getting amped as much as possible, so aspect of control on the neck, and then ice shards in a normal slot, obviously as higher damage as you can get here. Fortunately, because the damage does come from ice spikes, or at least half of it does, you don't need to worry too much about getting a super high item level weapon, though it does help the ice shards part of it, so still, you know, try to. Then on our rings, we need this one too, the Deep Freeze ice spikes. We're not using Deep Freeze, so that's whatever, but we do want ice spikes having a 50% increased explosion radius, because we will be getting the glyph that makes Blizzard have a larger radius. That also makes the ice spikes more spread out, so we need them to hit larger in order to make up for that and still do as much damage. Then we get this that really sets things off. When you freeze an enemy, there is a 33% chance that they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. You will be freezing a lot of enemies. You'll be putting a blizzard on like a pack of 10 enemies. Having 3.3 of them go vulnerable means those 3 get melted massively faster. but also when we hit vulnerable enemies, we are getting mana back. We are doing, obviously, loads of extra damage and activating synergies. So we want enemies vulnerable at range without having to use Teleport Frost Nova for when that's on cooldown or for when it's not safe to be happening a lot. And I experimented with this being more damage with a barrier or more vulnerable damage itself, but the consistency of having more vulnerable enemies in general really does help, especially with Ice Blades hitting vulnerable enemies, activating the cooldown reduction, and then spreading it to your other abilities. We need this to be happening. We need a bigger source of vulnerable than just Frost Nova. Then on our helmet, we have Shared Misery. Hitting a crowd control enemy will spread that crowd control to another enemy. This is so good. We are constantly hitting crowd control enemies with our enchantment, with Blizzard, and this is so good. Ice Spikes themselves can't trigger lucky hits, but the Blizzard cast can, and we've got the enchantment slot, we've got the Ice Blades that have a really high lucky hit chance. When we put our barrier on, it's 100%. So every time Ice Blades hits an enemy, there is a 50% chance it will freeze another enemy. So you put a Blizzard on a group of enemies, more enemies run in, and then just get passively instantly frozen because they dared to go near the pack of frozen Blizzard enemies because of Shared Misery. Then they get flung at with their Ice Spikes. It's just such a good bit of synergy. Then Raiment of the Infinite, of course, because we still want to be teleporting, grouping, frost novering, teleporting, stacking, blizzarding. It just works in every way we want it to. You don't need this one justified. On our legs, we want more lucky hit chance. This is great for, well, everything. It's what powers our mana restoration. It's what powers our resetting of cooldowns. It's what powers Shared Misery. It's what powers freezing enemies instantly with Blizzard. In Frostburn, which we want our unique gloves. The crit chance is lovely because Ice Spikes and the Ice Shard enchantment can crit. The cold damage, obviously great, we're just doing cold damage. The freeze duration is so good. Coupled with Iceheart Brais that we'll get to, enemies once frozen will stay like that for like 5 seconds. At so much damage window to kill them, but more than that, because they're frozen for longer, we get to stack up bigger and bigger shatters, which you really feel and notice, especially as enemies get higher health. And then the resource restore is great too, because Blizzard itself has a really good lucky hit chance. 51% when we have our barriers up. So this happens a fairly often amount of times and really does help your mana and basically solve it alongside the passive that we have too in Frigid Breeze. And then lastly, yes, the lucky hit chance to freeze. So because we have 51% on our Blizzard, let's call it 50. This is 24, let's call it 25. That means whenever we drop a Blizzard on a group of enemies, there is a 12.5% chance it will just instantly freeze them without needing to build up the chill. And that is what makes everything sing here, because as soon as it instantly freezes them, Shared Misery takes over, and all of our Frost synergy starts rolling, and it's non-stop until every enemy is dead on screen, and indeed nearby too, as you'll find yourself killing enemies off-screen all the time with this setup. It really does give it that oomph. Then Iceheart Brais, because look, sorcerers get one shot by an enemy looking at them mean, so losing the defensiveness on your legs is whatever. If you do want to push with this, then drop Iceheart Brais, put on a disobedience pair of legs with good defensive rolls, but you know, I like to push it. The freeze duration, as we said, is great, and the damage to frozen enemies is also great. But enemies that die while frozen have a chance to unleash a Frost Nova. Enemies die by being frozen all the time. It's weird if they don't, which means 1 in 5 is popping out Frost Novas, making everybody frozen, or frozen again, reapplying vulnerable, redoing shatters, redoing all of our freeze synergies, and it's what helps chain it round everywhere along with shared synergy. It just makes everything interconnect, and enemies just cannot move at any range. You have this, as I said with the last one, this screen-wide aura of if you come near me, you're frozen until you die. that kind of sums it up there with what aspects and gear we're using. So now we can kind of look at the actual gameplay here. So you have a group of enemies, you put Blizzard on them. At this point I need to make a specific note. Make sure your Blizzard is on your left click and you cast the Blizzard by actually left clicking the enemy. If you cast it by just floor targeting it, then the lucky hit won't happen. You need to actually click on the enemy. So you've clicked on the enemy, the Blizzard has happened, and it has instantly frozen them because of Frostburn. That is great. Now we are damaging them while they are frozen. We're doing bonus damage with the ice spikes because they are frozen. We're dealing bonus damage with control because they are frozen. We are dealing bonus damage with all of our passives, with our unique gear because they are frozen. And because they're frozen, they're building up the Shatter explosion. They now die while they're frozen, so they shatter out. They have been spreading the freeze because of shared misery, and because while they have been frozen, they have been getting hit with Ice Shards. They're doing even more. They've become vulnerable while getting frozen because of our biting cold, because of Ice Blades, because of the Frost Nova being shared. Then they pop, do loads of damage, freeze other people, etc., etc. That keeps rolling on, and you see how it just doesn't stop. From one single Blizzard, you can kill a group of enemies across the entire screen because everything perpetuates itself across these layers of freezing, refreezing, damage from being frozen, more freezing from being frozen, more damage from being frozen, and doing that in the form of massive AoE Blizzards that catch everything is so beyond satisfying and fun. And while I would still recommend the Ice Shards version of this setup for pushing high nightmares, it is undoubtedly Blizzard that is the speed farmer and better for your level content when you have that in mind. And then lastly, of course, it doesn't hurt that every frozen enemy we kill is giving us a huge barrier for, you know, the lucky hit while barrier and not dying. That really is nice to have, and is why we don't need 3 points in barrier on cooldown and just keeps us ticking, and also what lets us use Iceheart Brais as our legs, because that survivability from Icefall is really good. For a sorcerer, I must always add in these situations. So in terms of your actual gear, what affixes you're looking at, and all of that good stuff, well, you want crit damage to vulnerable, because crit damage is everything here, the crits from ice spikes, and the crit from ice shards. You want armor in your jewelry, you want max health in your actual armor itself. So in terms of affixes then, what you're looking for is firstly solving your mana issues so you can spam cast Blizzard. This is mana cost reduction, this is resource generation, this is chance on hit to restore primary resource, and it's more max mana. Once you've got a healthy amount of those, you are really good to go. Past that then, you want lucky hit chance, then you want crit chance, you want crit damage, you want ranks of devouring blaze, ranks of defensive skills, and lastly, you want general damage ups, like intelligence, like damage to chilled enemies, like damage to stunned enemies or fire enemies, and so on and so forth. And what you're looking for in stat breakpoints is you want to be getting as close to 40% crit chance as possible, so I'm still a little bit under where I'd like to be, as much crit damage as possible too. Make sure you use a wand and a focus for both the cooldown reduction and the lucky hit chance and the attack speed on your Blizzard, and then you want a good healthy amount of maximum mana coupled with the mana cost reduction. This is what lets me cast Blizzard at 26 mana, which given I have 150 max mana, yeah, that's a lot of casts. High mana generation too keeps you covered, and then you want at least 40% lucky hit chance with both of these combined, and at least 40% cooldown reduction too. So, that is all good, and all that remains then is your Paragon board. And the Paragon board is where this gets very, very fun, and quite different from the other builds, at least from the third board onwards. We start then with the first, as you can see, copy how I've done it, and you want Mastery Adept in here. So Blizzard has a 20% increased area, the extra damage is nice, but the area is really key. Then we move on, and go into Burning Instinct for the fire synergy. Grab the rare cluster over here for more damage to burning enemies, more damage to burning enemies, less damage from burning enemies, and glyph-wise we want more vulnerable damage. We're making things vulnerable constantly with all of the ways we have to do so, and this is really good then. And then just the general amp from hitting vulnerable enemies applying to everything is really noticeable. Moving on past that, we head into Frigid Fate, which you do eventually want to get if you have spare points, but it's very much a luxury legendary node. It's not required, so only if you're super higher level than me and have the points to spare. We want to go down here, grab the extra vulnerable damage to start with, and then head over to the glyph slot where we will put Tactician to amp this node in particular to get super more vulnerable damage, along with all the extra, yes, vulnerable damage, and then the 10% increased damage casting a defensive. We're always casting a defensive, and that works well. Then we go down into this where we get like most of the board. This is the Icefall board. Orientate it like this, so the legendary is pointing at the gate. Firstly, go right, grab the extra cold damage, and then the extra chill, which is one of the rare places we can get more chill from the Paragon board. Then we head left, and we get the damage reduction from chilled, and that's what's something that works really well in this build. We get to have damage reduction from both chilled and burning, which actually does help you stay alive quite well, especially on top of Icefall. So as far as sorcerers go, this is one of the tankiest ways to play. Then we pop down and actually get Icefall, head down here for this little cluster to do more damage to chilled enemies. So again, we get to double dip with both chilled and burning synergy. And then we go grab the glyph slot where we want to put the Frostbite glyph. This will increase your damage to chilled targets, and it will also make them do less damage to you when they no longer get frozen. Obviously, most things die before they unfreeze, but if you're pushing, this will come in very, very handy alongside the extra damage to chilled enemies and the less damage taken from chilled enemies. Then we want to head left and get the Elemental Summoner board, chiefly for just this. The 20% extra non-physical damage cluster here is really potent, and non-physical damage amps are huge for Sorcerer, as we have found out. After that, you would go down here to get to the next board, as we don't really need anything else going on here, even with Ice Blades. Ice Blades is just there to use it on cooldown and have the extra benefits. After that, then, you want to head down here to the board gate, as we don't actually need anything else from this board. We just really want the non-physical damage, and then your best bet is to get your Enchantment Master for more % non-physical damage, on top of eventually Static Surge for damage to stunned enemies and the extra maximum mana. Though these two boards are very much luxury, if you have kind of the state that I have here, you're pretty much there when it comes to powering up this playstyle. Your extra 2 glyphs would go to Control as your next most important one, as obviously we're damaging frozen enemies all the time, and then Enchanter just to amp your non-physical damage as much as possible. So there you have it, everybody. That is upgraded Chain Freeze Blizzard doing its thing and working beautifully well with all of that permanent Frost CC synergy, and it really is just a lot of fun to see. I mean, once your screen gets filled with blizzards, it's just so utterly satisfying. It really is. I hope you found this useful. If you do indeed try it, I hope it works well for you as it has for me, and I will see you as we get to Season 1 and all of the hopefully deliciously new, fixed, and less squishy sorcerer stuff we will be able to do. I have tried to do Incinerate and Fireball and other skills, and it's just not good enough to be worth showing you at this stage. So yeah, I really do hope that changes. But now then, like you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a good one.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice. To reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.